Godzilla 1954, or Gojira to be precise. What better place to start the Rediscovering Godzilla series than the beginning? Hold on. Something doesn't feel right. One sec.
Yeah, that's better. I've been watching Godzilla since I was a young wormling, especially the one from the Showa universe. I was just a little whippersnapper when I saw Godzilla King of the Monsters, and I remember thinking it was pretty boring compared to the insane campy monster fights that would come just 2 movies later. But now I'm a sophisticated adult dragon with an esteemed college education and an unmatched critical mind that the young cannot possibly comprehend. Does the film hold up to my expectations?
Well, I mean, kinda. Hello everyone, welcome to Rediscovering Godzilla, the series where I rewatch every single Godzilla movie ever made in hopes of rediscovering my old hero and reconnecting with my inner child. We start this kaiju-sized journey with not 1, but 2 Godzilla movies.
That's right, kiddos, you get 2 movie reviews for the price of 1 video. Don't say I never give you nothing.
Why are you reviewing 2 movies in 1 video? Seems like a waste of...
Shut up, viewer, I was just getting to that. You see, there are 2 versions of the first Godzilla film, Gojira and Godzilla, King of the Monsters. These 2 Godzilla films both mark the beginning of the Showa Era, the first official timeline of the Godzilla multiverse. Since both films tell a very similar story and both fit within the Showa Era timeline, I figured it would be just fine to review both movies in 1 video rather than making a whole different video for each. The story of Gojira acts as the beginning to several different Godzilla sagas, including Showa, Heisei, and several other smaller timelines of future films and comic books. Gojira was directed by Ishiro Honda and premiered in Japanese theaters in 1954. If you've never seen this film, you might assume it is every bit as wild and cartoonish as the rest of the Showa era. It really isn't. Gojira is a deathly serious film. Trolls might laugh at the dated special effects of this 70-year-old movie, but the message Gojira tries to convey and the tone it takes are no joke. Our story begins with a few fishing boats going missing near Odo Island. These ships are a direct reference to a ship from your world called Daigo Fugimori Maru, or Lucky Dragon number 5. Remind you of anyone? The crew of this ship was showered in radiation following the testing of Castle Bravo, a 15-megaton hydrogen bomb. The crew members of the Lucky Dragon were all heavily sickened by the fallout, with one of them dying. The survivors of Godzilla's first attack suffer very much the same fate, with only one of them living to tell the tale, though his fortune is very short-lived. A local elder believes the attacks to be the work of Gojira, a legendary monster destined to eat all the fish in the sea if a sacrifice is not sent adrift each year. In your world, the entire catch of the Lucky Dragon, along with many of the local sea life stretching all the way to Australia, were heavily contaminated by the testing of Castle Bravo. This sparked a well-warranted paranoia across Japan about the safety of eating fish, one of their primary sources of food at the time. It only took a few months for Godzilla to be produced from start to finish. The testing of Castle Bravo happened only a month before the script was even penned. Honda was determined to be as current as possible with his message about nuclear power by directly including parallel events from your world to the story he was trying to tell. After Godzilla emerges from the sea and wreaks havoc across a village, the government sends paleontologist Dr. Yamane to investigate. Godzilla shows himself to the villagers before returning to the sea. Godzilla's form is far more than a simple giant dinosaur. He is the manifestation of Japan's nuclear anxiety after the bombings of Hiroshima. The mushroom cloud shape of his head and his skin resembling radiation scarring is evidence of that. Dr. Yamane indicates that Godzilla is roughly 50 meters tall and that hydrogen bomb testing by the US was what pulled him from his underwater habitat. He insists Godzilla be studied, for if his secret to withstanding nuclear weapons could be uncovered, the benefits to mankind would be worth the risk. Yamane is ignored by the government, and the Japanese Navy is sent out to drop depth charges on Godzilla in an attempt to destroy him despite Yamane's harrowing warning.
水爆の推理を見ながらもなおかつ生命を保っているゴジラを誰をもって抹殺しようというのですか。
In the meantime, Dr. Yamane's daughter, Emiko, pays a visit to Dr. Serizawa, her fiancé by arranged engagement. She intends to break off the engagement for she's fallen in love with someone else, Ogata, a Zawa's ship captain. Before she can break it off, Serizawa divulges his current work to her. By accident, he had invented a destructive chemical compound he has dubbed the Oxygen Destroyer. This weapon was capable of disintegrating all organic matter in any body of water. Serizawa begs Emiko to keep his work a secret, for he fears the Oxygen Destroyer could be used to bring about the end of mankind, much like the H-bomb. Serizawa acts as a direct stand-in for Robert Oppenheimer, the architect of the atomic bomb in your world. His feelings towards his own work mirror that of Oppenheimer's feelings towards his work in the Manhattan Project.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. I suppose we all thought that, one way or another.
Upon Emiko's return, Godzilla emerges from Tokyo Bay and attacks Shinagawa. After laying waste to a passing train, he returns to the sea with relatively low casualties. In an attempt to prevent future attacks, the Japanese Self-Defense Force constructs a 30-meter-tall electrical fence along the shoreline designed to deliver 50,000 volts of electricity should Godzilla attempt to surface again. When Godzilla inevitably returns, he is met with a fierce resistance by not only the massive fence, but the tanks and mounted weapons firing at him from all angles. Just when it appears the fence is enough to keep him at bay, he unleashes his atomic breath, melting the towers and proceeding to rampage through Tokyo without mercy. No one is safe. Godzilla does not discriminate in his rage. Every building, bridge, and vehicle in his path is decimated by his very existence. Soldiers and civilians alike are blasted down by his atomic breath without a second thought. In some cases, his malice towards humanity seems conscious and intentional. No amount of weaponry or manpower was enough to put an end to the destruction. The only thing sending Godzilla back to the sea was himself. Even as the Air Force bombards him from behind, he bats them away like they are simply an annoyance and returns to the sea without so much as a scratch. Modern disaster movies have left me numb to mass devastation, but this movie was not afraid to show you the reality of destruction. In this scene in particular, this mother is cradling her children, telling them they will soon be with their father in heaven. It is implied that Godzilla destroyed them shortly after. The destruction left behind by Godzilla could only be equated to the devastation left in the wake of the Hiroshima bombing. Even those who were lucky enough to survive the initial blast would suffer violent side effects to the nuclear fallout. The majority of the survivors not stomped beneath Godzilla's feet were now dying from radiation sickness left behind by his atomic breath. Hospitals and shelters are brimming with the dead and dying. The cries of children litter the air as they're saying goodbye to their loved ones. Distraught by the destruction, Emiko tells Ogata about Serizawa's oxygen destroyer. They rush to his home to convince him to use it against Godzilla, for it may be the only weapon capable of destroying him. They are met with a fierce resistance as he attempts to burn his own research. He insists that if his work go public, he would bring about a fate worse than Godzilla could ever inflict. It is during their argument that a televised prayer for the people of Tokyo plays in the lab. You can almost see it in his eyes. Serizawa knows in that moment that he has a responsibility to use the power granted to him by his brilliance responsibly. He agrees to use the oxygen destroyer, but it would be the first and only time it would ever be used. A Navy ship carries Ogata and Serizawa to Godzilla's location, where they dive down to unleash the oxygen destroyer. Upon their success, Serizawa cuts his own line and allows himself to be overtaken by his own weapon. He knew that even with his research destroyed, those with ill intent could still extract what they needed from him by whatever means necessary, even if that meant torture. I don't really blame him. I like to posture that I'm a pretty tough dragon, but I'm willing to admit I would probably break under torture. I believe Serizawa knew the moment the oxygen destroyer was revealed to the world, his fate would be sealed. His morality would not let him live. As he was listening to the prayer broadcast, I could see the inner conflict brewing in his head as he desperately tried to justify keeping the weapon a secret, if only to save his own life. In the end, he put the value of humanity above his own individual life. Though Godzilla would go on to be one of the most iconic figures in modern media, I don't believe he was the true main character of the original film. Honda was not secretive about his feelings towards nuclear war. Serizawa acts as the personification of what Honda believes science should be and how we as an advancing civilization should behave. The progress of science should not be measured by what we can do, but what we should do. Serizawa is definitely the hero of this story, but I don't think Serizawa, king of the Chad scientists, would have made a very good franchise. In fact, Godzilla would not have been nearly as successful had it not been for its Americanized cousin, Godzilla, King of the Monsters. No, not that one, this one. In 1956, an Americanized version of Godzilla was produced. The film added several cut-in scenes starring American actor Raymond Burr, along with several Japanese actors to help him blend in with some of the reshot scenes. Some of the original characters were added to the scenes as well, with their heads conveniently turned away from the camera. Before making this video, I watched both Gojira and Godzilla King of the Monsters back to back, and man, I had no idea how insanely different they were. Though I would consider myself a Godzilla fanatic, I actually never saw the original Japanese version of Gojira until I started this series. I know. Get it out of your system, you weebs. In my defense, the original film wasn't even widely available until 2004, and Teenage Lore Dragon wasn't about to spend his allowance on a movie he thought he already owned. Watching Godzilla King of the Monsters feels like I'm watching a live streamer reacting to the original Godzilla movie. The events of the original film almost feel like background noise for the American guy to just react to. He's got this one Japanese guy translating for him and just straight up telling him and the audience by extension what the heck is happening. The events of the movie almost play out exactly the same as the original Gojira, with Raymond Burr witnessing all of the events and reporting them back to the United States. Though his role in the story is fairly minor, he does act as a distraction from the three main characters of the original film. His whole presence in the movie feels like fan fiction. It's almost as if the producer decided to put his own OC into the original Godzilla story, where he is like best friends with all of the main characters and just watches the events unfold as they normally would. If he had made Any Dude's Kiss, I would have been 100% convinced that this was just a Wattpad story of the 50s. Despite all of my jokes, this movie actually wasn't unbearable to watch. Adding in a white dude to a Japanese tale may seem a bit sussy on the surface, but at the end of the day, Steve Martin was not the hero of this movie. He was just a humble observer. It's not as if he personally invented the oxygen destroyer and then personally dove down to shove it down Godzilla's throat before heroically emerging from the water at the last second. All of the main cast of the original film fulfilled their roles as normal, heroism and all. For a movie of the 50s, this was probably about as anti-racist as you could really get. Given how generally racist most of the population was, adding in Raymond Burr as a stand-in protagonist may have been the only way to make this movie palatable to Western audiences. If it wasn't for this recut, it's likely that we wouldn't have as much Godzilla media in the United States today. Westerners of the 50s may have been cringe, but they did have money, and it is through money that franchises are born. I mean, I could have done without Godzilla 1998, but I couldn't imagine a world without the Monsterverse. That being said, there were a couple of decisions that I believe would leave a bad precedent for American Godzilla movies going forward. The final line of Gojira comes from Dr. Yamane, stating that if the testing of nuclear weapons does not stop, another Godzilla may arise in the future. Despite the endless sequels that would come afterwards, this was not just some cheesy sequel bait. This was an actual warning. Honda was sending a very clear message to the world that the destruction left behind by Godzilla and nuclear weapons by extension would continue to persist if testing was not halted. The final line of Godzilla King of the Monsters comes from Steve Martin, stating that the world is now safe thanks to Serizawa's sacrifice, and that Serizawa had no choice but to die. The finality of his statement implies that the United States had no responsibility in the creation of Godzilla, and that the King of the Monsters was just a natural disaster. By doing this, they completely undermine the fact that Serizawa did in fact have a choice. He could have just as easily sent someone else down there to unleash the oxygen destroyer and then live an unbelievably lucrative life as the inventor of the world's most powerful weapon. But he didn't. Hell, he didn't even have to die after killing Godzilla. He didn't sacrifice himself to stop Godzilla. He sacrificed himself to stop his own research. Throughout this movie, they tend to remove any and all blame from the United States or any developing nuclear power by extension and silence the main message of the original film. It is for this reason that Gojira is by far the superior movie. If you're in the Godzilla fandom or grew up watching these movies, there's a good chance that you've watched Godzilla King of the Monsters rather than Gojira. If you've never had the opportunity, I highly suggest you watch it. As of filming this video, Gojira is available on HBO Max, but this is the internet, so it's kind of available everywhere. The beginning of the Godzilla franchise had an incredibly strong start. Both movies were so widely loved by audiences all over the world that they became some of the most recognizable cultural icons known to man. The first film is an artistic masterpiece with an incredibly powerful message to deliver that is still relevant even to this day. But if I had to levy one complaint I have with it, is that it just didn't quite feel like a Godzilla film to me. I grew up watching movies like Godzilla vs. Megalon, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, Godzilla vs. Kong, Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, and the endless Godzilla vs. movies. I didn't fall in love with this franchise because of its powerful allegory. My big stupid meathead brain fell in love with watching monsters throw buildings at each other. I went on this cinematic journey in an attempt to reconnect with my inner child, and though I've started this journey pleasantly surprised by how well done the first movie was, I'm pretty sure my inner child fell asleep after the first 30 minutes while my adult brain was soy-facing at the symbolism. So from a critical standpoint, I rank Godzilla as an S-tier film, but from a kick-ass movie standpoint, I rate it like, I don't know, a B? And now with these movies behind me, I can continue my journey reviewing every single Godzilla film ever made. After all, the journey of 1,000 movies begins with the first movie. Movies? Whatever, just subscribe if you want to see more. Bye.